Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Today we're diving into one of the most mysterious and contradictory aspects of the wizarding world, Animagi. These witches and wizards, capable of transforming into animals at will, seem like a true marvel of magic. But when you take a closer look, their abilities raise more questions than answers. Let's unravel some of the strange inconsistencies that continue to baffle even the most devoted fans. Enjoy the journey. Number 1. What happens to their clothes during transformation? One of the most obvious paradoxes: clothing. In the Prisoner of Azkaban film, we see Peter Pettigrew, after turning back into a rat, leave his clothes behind. Makes sense. But when he transforms from a rat into a man, his clothes are somehow already on him. So what's the deal? Do clothes stay behind or transform along with the body? Is the transformation spell somehow advanced enough to account for wardrobe changes, or do Animagi need to undress beforehand to avoid tearing their outfits? This seems to fall somewhere between cinematic convenience and magical ambiguity. Number 2. Why can't Dementors detect Animagi? The movie skips this, but the book gives us a bit more clarity. Sirius Black, as an unregistered animagus, escaped Azkaban because Dementors supposedly can't recognize animals. They only sense human souls. And here comes the logical dilemma. An animagus is still a human on the inside. The soul remains intact. So why can't Dementors, beings that are hypersensitive to thoughts, emotions, and life essence, sense Sirius when he's in his dog form? Could it be that transformation magic somehow masks the soul itself, or is this simply a gap in the logic of the magical universe? Number 3. Do Animagi really understand they don't get to choose their form? The magical world is full of powers that resist control. Take the Patronus, for instance. Its form reflects the witch or wizard's innermost self. You can't pick or change it unless under deep emotional upheaval. The same goes for becoming an animagus. You don't know in advance what animal you'll turn into. It's always a surprise, sometimes pleasant, sometimes awkward. The Marauders became Animagi to help their friend Moony. Did they realize they were gambling with their future? Luckily, their animal forms turned out to be useful. But what about Rita Skeeter? Her beetle form was perfect for eavesdropping and gossip hunting. But what if she'd become, let's say, a hippopotamus? How would that have worked out? Number 4. How did the Marauders manage to complete the animagus process? Becoming an animagus is considered one of the most difficult magical feats in the wizarding world. There are 10 steps involved, and each one is a trial. It all starts with holding a mandrake leaf in your mouth for an entire lunar cycle. From full moon to full moon, you can't swallow it, spit it out, or remove it even for a moment. Make one mistake, start over, and that's just the beginning. A single misstep could result in magical catastrophe. The wizard might end up permanently half human, half beast. So how did the Marauders, teenage pranksters, full of energy and mischief, manage to master such complex and risky magic while still at Hogwarts? It feels less like determination and more like a small magical miracle. Number 5. Why are there so few Animagi? Official records show that in the entire 20th century, only 7 registered Animagi existed. 7! That's it for an entire century. And Peter, Sirius, James, and Rita all went unregistered. So why is this powerful and practical magic so rare? Sure, you can't choose your animal form, but nearly any creature has some advantage. Peter survived because he was a rat, living 12 years undetected in the Weasley household. So why don't more wizards try to learn it? Is it fear, the complexity? Or does the Ministry of Magic deliberately discourage animagus transformations, afraid of losing control? Number 6. How does consciousness work in animal form? Sirius Black crouched beneath a park bench in his animagus form, eyes fixed on Harry, heart pounding like a drum. He didn't bark. He didn't run. He waited, planned, watched. A dog, yet not a dog. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Lupin says, The marauders learned to become Animagi to keep me company. They never lost themselves. But what does not losing yourself truly mean? Sirius still had memories. He recognized names. He understood strategy. But there's a difference between memory and mind. Did he think in words or in smells and movement? Could he truly reason, or was instinct helping him survive? When he attacked Peter Pettigrew in the Shrieking Shack, how much of it was calculated rage and how much was the animal in him? The longer you stay in form, the more the lines blur. Peter lived as a rat for over a decade. When he returned to human shape, he was jittery, hunched, crawling through life. The man had become the animal. He made choices like a rat, sneaky, desperate, afraid. No one teaches Animagi how to protect their minds. No one warns them about the slow decay of self. Perhaps the transformation is more than skin deep. Perhaps the body changes first, but the soul follows, quietly, gradually, and by the time you feel it slipping, it's already too late. You remember your name, but you forget why it mattered. Number 7. Can Animagi use magic while transformed? Sirius Black, in dog form, never cast a single spell. He chased, growled, followed, but never conjured, and yet the magic was still in him. He was born a wizard, a powerful one, so why didn't he use it? In the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore tells Harry, you do not need a wand to perform magic. It simply helps channel it. If that's true, what's stopping an animagus? The answer might lie in form. Magic flows through intent, focus, and expression, but how does a bird express a spell without words? How does a beetle focus its will? The animal body may limit the human soul. Perhaps the magical core stays dormant, trapped behind instincts, claws, and silence, not lost, but locked. But what if someone found a way to unlock it? Imagine Bellatrix Lestrange turning into a serpent and still being able to curse with a flick of her tongue. Imagine a falcon animagus casting Expelliarmus mid-flight. The wizarding world has strict laws, but none address this. Maybe because the Ministry fears the very idea. A spell-casting animagus wouldn't be a disguise, it would be a weapon. No such case is public, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. Maybe it's buried, forgotten, or maybe the most dangerous Animagi are still out there, silent, unseen, and far more powerful than anyone dares to believe. Number 8. What happens if an animagus dies in animal form? A stray cat lies motionless in Nocturne Alley. No one notices, no one cares. But what if that cat had once been a wizard, a scholar, a spy? In the world of Animagi, death raises more questions than answers. If a witch dies while transformed, does her body revert? Or is she buried as a beast, her true name never spoken again? There's no mention in the records, no documented case in the Ministry files, not even Dumbledore spoke of it. But imagine if Minerva McGonagall had been struck down during the Battle of Hogwarts, hit while in cat form. Would her students have found only a lifeless tabby on the floor? Would they have known it was her? In Order of the Phoenix, McGonagall says, being an animagus is not just about skill, it's about control. But death is the one thing we can't control. The implications are terrifying. A murdered animagus might disappear forever, their death uninvestigated, their enemies unpunished. It's the perfect cover-up. Transform, travel, die unseen. It makes you wonder how many mysterious animal corpses have passed unnoticed. Through wizarding history, how many lives ended in silence? There is no magical trace, no glowing aura that says, this was once a man, just fur, feathers, or scales. A tragic irony, the spell that hides you in life may erase you in death. And in the wizarding world, being forgotten is sometimes more dangerous than being killed. Number 9. Can Animagi lose their human identity? Peter Pettigrew spent 12 years as a rat, 12 years eating crumbs, hiding under furniture, sleeping in corners. He didn't just hide from the world, he stopped being part of it. When he finally turned back into a man in The Prisoner of Azkaban, he was twitchy, hunched, filthy. Sirius growled, "Look at him. Does he even remember what it means to be human?" It wasn't just disgust, it was truth. The mind adapts, it learns to survive. And if survival means forgetting language, morality, empathy, then the mind lets those things go. For an animagus, it's tempting to remain hidden in fur or feathers. No responsibility, no pain, just instinct. But instinct is a slippery thing. Stay too long and it stops being borrowed. It becomes home. Even Rita Skeeter, who used her beetle form for short bursts, showed signs of detachment. She was gleeful when caught, not ashamed. She had spent so long crawling through lies, she couldn't recognize the line anymore. Her transformation wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Beetles don't care who they hurt. The ministry doesn't study this. There are no reports, no counseling, no warnings. Animagus magic is filed under advanced transfiguration, not mental health. But the deeper danger may not be in the spell, it may be in forgetting that you were ever more than claw, fang, or wing. Number 10, is it ethical to use animagus abilities for spying? Rita Skeeter buzzed unseen on the window pane of St. Mungo's. Behind the glass, healers whispered confidential news, lives, deaths, scandals. She listened, she wrote, she sold the truth, bent and poisoned. In the Goblet of Fire, Hermione confronts her. You're an unregistered animagus. You've been spying on people for stories. Rita doesn't deny it. She smirks. The beetle was her perfect disguise, but Rita wasn't the first, and certainly not the last. Imagine if Lucius Malfoy had access to such magic, slinking through corridors as a snake, listening to order meetings. Or if someone within the ministry like Dolores Umbridge used it to monitor students or political rivals. The line between spying and gathering intelligence blurs fast when you have fur or wings. The Ministry of Magic claims to monitor all registered Animagi, but registration is voluntary. And who would willingly expose their greatest tool for secrecy? There's no animagus detection squad, no magical signature to trace. Once transformed, the wizard vanishes, morally, legally, physically. It's not just a spell, it's an escape from accountability. And yet no law truly forbids eavesdropping as a beetle. No court has ever tried an animagus for invasion of privacy. Because the magical world has always been more fascinated by power than by boundaries. And sometimes the smallest insect carries the loudest secret. Number 11, can someone be both a werewolf and an animagus? Remus Lupin stared at the moonlight bleeding through the cracks of the shrieking shack. His bones ached, his breath shortened. The transformation was moments away, but imagine, just for a second, that Lupin had mastered animagus magic. What if he had turned into a bird, light, small, free, just before the full moon took hold? Would it have saved him, or would the wolf inside simply tear the bird apart from within? No one ever said it out loud, but the idea haunted the darkest corners of magical theory. Could a werewolf use animagus magic to escape his curse? The rituals are rigorous, mandrake leaf in the mouth, for a full lunar cycle, among other things. Lupin, as a Hogwarts professor, had the discipline, but Dumbledore never encouraged him. Perhaps he feared what might happen if two transformations collided. The wolf is not just a body, it is a force. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Lupin says, "When I transform, I am no longer safe, I am not in control." So what happens if a man, moments before losing control, becomes a stag or a fox? Would the werewolf's magic override the animagus form? Would the transformation be ripped apart mid-shift, twisting the body into something unnatural, something cursed and beyond healing? There are no records, no trials, not because it's impossible, but perhaps because those who tried were never seen again. The idea of a werewolf turning into another beast sounds clever, until you realize both magics come from places that don't forgive mistakes. In the magical world, power layered on power doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes it means chaos. Number 12. Do potions affect Animagi in animal form? Rita Skeeter perched on the windowsill of a ministry office, her tiny beetle legs barely making a sound on the dusty stone. No one noticed her. That was the beauty of it. But what if, just beneath her, someone had left out a shallow dish of milk laced with poison? Would the venom affect the beetle? Or the woman hidden inside? Animagus magic transforms flesh and bone, but what about the internal systems? Are the organs truly those of an animal or a magical mimicry? When Professor Slughorn described a calming draught to his class, he once said, "The body must accept the potion, or it will reject it entirely." But whose body is it when a witch has turned into a cat? Would a soothing potion make her purr, or kill her? Sirius Black, in his dog form, once survived for weeks on the run, scavenging food from bins and dark alleyways. He never mentioned being cautious about what he ate. But that was desperation. What if someone had known? What if Bellatrix Lestrange had left a poisoned rabbit behind Spinner's End, waiting for the hound to bite? Sirius may have died with no one even knowing it was him. There's no known case in the books where a potion was used on an animagus in animal form, but the risk is terrifying. Poison might bypass the magical identity entirely, killing the person through their borrowed body. And without a wand, without the ability to speak or transform in time, what defense would they have? In the world of magic, where identity shifts with a thought, one drop could mean the end. Number 13. Can an animagus transform into a magical creature? The rules of magic, as known to even the most novice of Hogwarts students, are ancient, structured, and seemingly immutable. Animagi, the rare and gifted few, possess the power to transform into animals at will, ordinary animals. Sirius Black's imposing black dog, Peter Pettigrew's trembling rat, Professor McGonagall's tabby cat with the square spectacles around her eyes. These are the limits the magical world accepts, but beneath this veil of accepted practice, a whisper exists, rumours of Animagi who have pushed beyond, who have dared to transform into creatures that exist only in legend or in the deepest corners of the Forbidden Forest. When Harry Potter first conjured his Patronus, a dazzling silver stag that charged across the lake to repel the Dementors, he had no idea that it would raise questions not only about his father's legacy, but about the very boundaries of magical transformation. A Patronus, after all, can take the form of a magical creature. Dumbledore's own was a phoenix, and this raises a question that has long gone unanswered in the halls of magical academia. If a Patronus can become a magical beast, why not an animagus form? The transformation of an animagus is not random. It reflects the inner self, the unchangeable core of the witch or wizard. Sirius became a dog not by choice, but by nature. Animagi do not pick their form, it picks them. And if the core self of a person is so closely aligned with something not entirely mundane, does the body follow? Is it not conceivable that somewhere someone has become a hippogriff or a thestral, or even something darker, more dangerous? There is one name that often arises in these forbidden conversations. Morrigan Loon, a witch of the late 1800s, was known for her reclusive habits and obsession with magical beasts. She was never registered as an animagus, but several sources claim to have seen a winged horse watching from the cliffs near her coastal estate. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures dismissed these sightings as coincidence or unregistered magical creature activity. But a diary entry from Newton Scamander, written before the publication of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, casts doubt. "She was gone," he wrote, "but her presence lingered in the clouds. I swear I saw her, her eyes unchanged, peering from the body of a Granian as it soared toward the sea." Animagus transformations are strictly regulated. The Ministry maintains a registry complete with detailed descriptions, markings, and magical signatures. The reason is obvious. Such power, if left unchecked, could be used for espionage, theft, or far darker deeds. But what happens when a transformation is so drastic, so beyond normal comprehension, that it defies registration? Would the Ministry even know how to document a wizard who could become a basilisk? Would they dare admit such a transformation were even possible? Magical creature transformation may border on the forbidden, but the precedent is there. Take Remus Lupin. Though not an animagus, his monthly transformation into a werewolf reveals something critical. The human body can endure magical changes that far exceed natural limitations. It may be a curse, yes, but it is also a proof of concept. The physical form can be overwritten, painfully, yes, but it can be done. A lesser-known case surrounds a Bulgarian wizard named Radoslav Železnov. Železnov was never officially declared an animagus. However, during the First Wizarding War, he disappeared from all records, only to be discovered decades later living among a family of centaurs in the Rhodope Mountains. When approached by the Department of International Magical Cooperation, he did not deny who he had been, but neither did he admit what he had become. The centaurs protected him, and when ministry officials tried to retrieve him, they were met with spells of such ancient power that they turned back. Železnov vanished again. Some claim he had learned to take centaur form, not through traditional animagus magic, but through a hybrid method lost to time. Even within Hogwarts itself, there are clues. In her earlier years, Professor McGonagall once warned students, "Becoming an animagus is a dangerous and delicate process. It is not something one attempts lightly, and certainly not without ministry approval." But why was such stress placed on the word dangerous? The common belief is that partial transformations or permanent disfigurement are the primary risks. Yet the older books, those stored not in the general library but in the restricted section, speak of darker fates, of transformations that did not end, of wizards who became creatures so thoroughly that they lost their human minds, roaming the edges of the world, more beast than man. It is said that Gellert Grindelwald, in his youth, explored these transformations, not as an animagus, but as a seeker of absolute power. According to a report confiscated by the Aura Office in 1945, Grindelwald once consulted an ancient ritual known as the mirror binding, which allegedly allowed one to become that which they saw in their soul's reflection. The ritual was incomplete and the document was confiscated, but its very existence is telling. Grindelwald believed it possible to transcend human form entirely, not by illusion, not by polyjuice, but by true metamorphosis. Let us also consider magical theory. If metamorph magi like Nymphadora Tonks can alter their physical appearance at will, even to the point of changing apparent age, gender, and species traits, then how far does the spectrum of transformation stretch? Tonks could produce features that resembled those of animals, a pig's snout, for example, or vividly coloured hair like a bird's plumage. She could not perhaps become a creature outright, but could such talent be refined, focused through ritual, discipline, and dangerous experimentation? In the tales of Beadle the Bard, the story of the warlock's hairy heart includes a form of self-transmutation. Though stylized as a moral tale, it demonstrates that magic can indeed penetrate the very structure of the human soul, pulling forth the monstrous, physicalizing what should remain spiritual. This is not animagus magic, but its cousin, proof that the human body and spirit can be twisted into something else entirely. Number 14. Why doesn't the ministry use animagi in espionage? The question has haunted many a curious mind delving into the murky politics of the wizarding world. If animagi possess the extraordinary ability to transform into animals and move unnoticed among crowds or infiltrate heavily guarded places, why hasn't the Ministry of Magic fully weaponized this power for espionage? The answer is as elusive and complex as the transformation itself. Animagi are rare, their transformation demanding both tremendous skill and rigorous discipline. According to the Animagus Registry, there were fewer than 10 registered animagi in the entire 20th century. This rarity alone would make it difficult to form an elite espionage unit, but even that doesn't fully explain why, during the height of the First or Second Wizarding Wars, the Ministry did not pursue this avenue with more determination. One would imagine a battalion of animagus spies, silent, swift, able to sneak behind enemy lines and eavesdrop in unsuspecting forms, would have been invaluable. The process of becoming an animagus is described by Professor McGonagall as dangerous, complex, and requiring months, if not years, of study and practice. A single mistake could result in permanent disfigurement or even death. Animagus transformations are not simply learned from a book. They require an inner connection to one's magical identity. This element alone limits how scalable the skill truly is. It is not like training a regular aura, it's closer to nurturing a rare magical gift. Perhaps the ministry never developed a spy unit of Animagi because it simply couldn't find enough capable individuals. But the matter becomes even more perplexing when one considers specific individuals who mastered the transformation independently and illegally. The marauders, James Potter, a stag, Sirius Black, a dog, and Peter Pettigrew, a rat, successfully became Animagi while still students at Hogwarts. This astonishing feat suggests that with motivation and secrecy, young wizards were able to accomplish what the ministry claimed to be nearly impossible. And if they could do it, why couldn't the government with all its resources? Peter Pettigrew's use of his animagus form is perhaps the most glaring example of the espionage potential. As a rat, he lived for years undetected in the Weasley household, and prior to that remained hidden on the grounds of Hogwarts. He passed unnoticed in places filled with magical security. This proves beyond doubt that Animagi could be the ministry's most effective spies if only they were utilized properly. The ministry's failure to develop Animagi for intelligence work may also reflect its own paranoia. Control is central to the ministry's identity. Animagi, by their very nature, represent a loss of control. They can escape detection, move through wards and boundaries, and ignore social norms and magical law. It is no coincidence that the ministry insists all Animagi register with detailed documentation of their animal form. As Sirius Black noted bitterly, "The ministry never knew I was an animagus," a fact that allowed him to escape Azkaban. Perhaps the idea of a government-trained force of such uncontrollable individuals was seen as more threatening than helpful. During Voldemort's first rise, Barty Crouch Sr. ran the Department of Magical Law Enforcement with an iron fist. He was known for his ruthless efficiency and deep distrust of unconventional magic. It's not hard to imagine that such a man would be deeply suspicious of an animagus unit. Trust is paramount in espionage, and Animagi are, by design, secretive. Crouch may have preferred more traceable and controllable tools like Veritaserum or the Imperious Curse. Ironically, these more regulated methods are morally more invasive, but far less difficult to monitor. Moreover, the ethical implications of deploying Animagi as spies are deeply troubling. The wizarding world operates on an unspoken code of conduct, and violating the sanctity of private spaces, homes, schools, even minds, is seen as a dangerous precedent. If Animagi could sneak into private meetings or households, who would be safe? What safeguards could be put in place to prevent abuse? If the ministry sanctioned such methods, it would be dangerously close to the behavior of Death Eaters themselves. Consider the case of Rita Skeeter, an unregistered animagus who transformed into a beetle to listen in on confidential conversations. She used this ability not for noble intelligence work, but to write damaging exposés in the Daily Prophet, fabricating and distorting truth for personal gain. Hermione Granger captured her in a jar during the Triwizard Tournament and threatened to expose her unless she ceased her unethical reporting. Rita's animagus form made her virtually immune to traditional security methods, again proving the dangers such powers could unleash when misused. The ministry's decision to avoid such tactics may also stem from fear of setting a dangerous precedent. If the government begins using illegal transformations for intelligence, what's to stop other institutions or individuals from doing the same? The entire system of trust would erode. The wizarding world is already plagued by hidden chambers, secret identities, and treacherous magic. Introducing government-sponsored animagus espionage would only deepen the shadows. The political bureaucracy of the ministry may have also played a role. Departments operate in silos, and the wheels of magical governance turn slowly. Even during wartime, the ministry showed itself to be woefully unprepared for Voldemort's tactics. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, it took months for the ministry to acknowledge Voldemort's return. It was far more concerned with maintaining appearances than with radical action. Forming an elite animagus unit would have required visionary leadership, and such leadership was sorely lacking. There's also the question of visibility. Animagus forms, while discreet, are not necessarily unnoticeable. A dog, a rat, or even a bird might draw attention in the wrong setting. Animagus spies would have to be deployed with extreme precision and planning. Their effectiveness would depend on the environments they were sent to. In a crowded Muggle city, a cat or crow might go unnoticed. But in a secure, magical facility with anti-creature wards, the risk would be immense. Number 15. Can injuries in animal form carry over to the human body? Of all magical disciplines explored in the world of Harry Potter, few are as enigmatic and dangerous as Animagus transformation. This gift, transforming oneself into an animal at will, has long fascinated students and scholars alike. But beneath its glamour lies a shadowed question. What happens when an Animagus is wounded while in their animal form? More precisely, if the Animagus is injured, say a leg broken or body pierced, does returning to human form heal the damage, or does the injury follow them across the boundary between shapes? J.K. Rowling never answers this question directly in the text, but careful observation of canon events and magical logic paints a picture more disturbing than many might expect. We begin with Sirius Black, the most famous Animagus to fight in open battle. Throughout the Harry Potter series, Sirius takes on the form of a massive black dog, Padfoot, to protect Harry, evade capture, and even fight Dementors. In Order of the Phoenix, during the battle at the Department of Mysteries, Sirius duels Bellatrix Lestrange in human form. But earlier, in Prisoner of Azkaban, we see him as Padfoot, chasing and biting Peter Pettigrew in his rat form. There is no evidence that injuries suffered, as Padfoot magically vanished upon reverting to human shape. On the contrary, when Sirius returns to Grimmauld Place, he remains gaunt, exhausted and scarred, a shadow of his former self. The logic of magic in Rowling's world consistently treats transformations as cosmetic overlays of a singular essence. Whether one uses Polyjuice Potion or Transfiguration, the core remains intact. Consider how Polyjuice does not heal injury or illness. Hermione's transformation into Millicent Bulstrode leaves her with a partial cat face due to an error. Thus, transformation does not overwrite physical truth. If a witch has a scar and transforms into another person, that scar may disappear temporarily, but it remains when she returns to herself. By extension, an Animagus's wound must remain consistent across both forms. Let's construct a scenario to understand the implications. Imagine Minerva McGonagall, registered Animagus, in her tabby cat form during the First Wizarding War. She uses her feline form to sneak into enemy territory, crawling through the wreckage of a Death Eater stronghold. A jagged trap, set precisely for small intruders, crushes her back leg. Bones crack, skin tears. She's bleeding, limping, and gasping with tiny lungs. If she reverts to human form, what happens? Does her wound vanish in a puff of transformation? Highly unlikely. Instead, the broken leg translates directly onto her human anatomy, the wound simply shifting scale and structure, cat paw, to human ankle or foot, torn flesh to lacerated skin. This is the danger buried in Animagus combat. For all its cleverness and mobility, it introduces a frail body into a battlefield designed for death. A dog's hide is no match for a severing charm. A rat's bones, as Peter Pettigrew surely learned, are vulnerable to even casual spells. If a curse slices into a bird Animagus's wing, the wizard re-emerging may find their arm barely attached. In Deathly Hallows, Rita Skeeter's Animagus form, a beetle, could have been easily crushed had Hermione been more careless. No charm of transformation offers magical invulnerability. The same principle applies to magical creatures like werewolves. Remus Lupin, for instance, does not suffer amnesia between transformations. When he becomes a werewolf, the injuries inflicted during that night, scratches, bites, bruises, are visible once he returns to his human self. There's no reset button. Magic doesn't erase pain, it transmutes it. The same must be assumed for Animagi. Sirius's battered frame upon escaping Azkaban, despite spending weeks in dog form to avoid the Dementor's full effects, remained gaunt and weak when he resumed human shape. Peter Pettigrew offers another glimpse into this truth. When he resurfaces in Goblet of Fire, he appears sickly, shaking, and damaged, despite having spent years in the form of a rat. One might assume the small form would protect him, But the opposite seems true. He suffers from physical deterioration, living in sewers, chewing rotten food, hiding in shadows. All these left marks not just on his mind, but on his body. This strongly suggests that sustained life in animal form does not prevent cumulative harm, and injury to the animal body reflects on the human body as well. Furthermore, the risks grow exponentially in combat. The wizard's human body is at least trained to withstand magical impact. Shield charms, reflexes, dual experience, all these are void in animal form. A cat may leap away but cannot chant Protego. A dog might bite but cannot parry a hex. Animagus warfare is thus not cunning but reckless bravery, bordering on suicidal. Sirius's decision to become Padfoot during the battle at the Department of Mysteries would have left him utterly defenseless had he encountered a more prepared Death Eater. The fact that he stayed human that night suggests he understood the limit of his alternate form's utility. Even accidental transformations provide evidence. Take the curious case of Rita Skeeter again. She spends extended time as a beetle hiding in the hair of Hermione and others. If, during this time, someone had swatted her unknowingly, injuring even a wing or leg, her human body would have manifested those wounds. A torn insect wing could mean a damaged human shoulder or arm. And given the disparity in anatomy, there is the very real danger that some injuries translate disproportionately. A broken bird wing might reappear as a shattered collarbone. A wounded hind leg might manifest in a fractured pelvis. We must also consider magical laws of essence and identity. The theory behind transfiguration as taught at Hogwarts holds that transformed objects retain magical memory of their original state. Professor McGonagall emphasizes this in class. A porcupine turned into a pincushion is not truly a pincushion. It reverts when the spell is lifted. This suggests that all transformations are surface layer illusions atop an unchanging core. The body remembers. Wounds inflicted on the surface layer affect the essence beneath. Number 16. Can Animagi sense magic while in animal form? In the cool shadow of the Forbidden Forest, a black dog prowled silently between the trees, ears pricked, eyes alert. He moved like a shadow, a phantom with breath, his senses sharpened not just by instinct, but by something deeper. He was not just any dog, he was Sirius Black, a wizard clothed in the form of a creature. But the question, the curious knot of it all, lingered. In this canine skin, did Sirius still sense the thrum of magic? Animagi have always been the silent sentinels of magical transformation. Unlike those who use Polyjuice Potion to adopt another form, the method which comes with its clumsy limitations, Animagi do not merely wear the shape of an animal, they become it. Their very bones, sinews, and minds are rewritten. Yet curiously, the question persists. Do they retain the gift, or the curse, of sensing magic? To answer this, we must consider the paradox of consciousness. Animagi do not lose their intelligence. This is clear from the behavior of Sirius Black when he escapes Azkaban. He slips past Dementors in his dog form, not because he ceases to feel despair, but because, as he tells Harry, they are less able to sense his thoughts when he is a dog. They couldn't see me, he explained. Dogs aren't that different from humans, but they can't read animal minds as well. This points to a certain continuity of mind, even within the altered body. Yet that only raises more questions. If the Dementors, themselves magical entities, struggle to read the minds of Animagi, does that mean the magic of the animal body is shielded? Or does it suggest that magic in the animagus form behaves differently, not lost, but rechanneled, redirected, like a river diverted underground? We must consider another incident. Peter Pettigrew, perhaps the most detested animagus of them all, spent years as a rat living with the Weasleys. He was not merely unnoticed, he was undetected by Albus Dumbledore, whose magical acumen was such that he could detect undercurrents of enchantment in a room without uttering a word. Yet Scabbers evaded him. Was this because Peter, in his rat form, no longer radiated the same magical presence? Or was he actively suppressing his signature, masking it like a chameleon? If an animagus becomes invisible to detection spells, or at least dimmed in magical sensitivity, that implies a dampening, a thinning of magical perception in animal form. But the opposite case can also be argued. If Sirius was able to feel the proximity of Dementors in his animagus body, doesn't that mean some magical sense remained? Take the example of the Shrieking Shack. Sirius enters it in his dog form through the Whomping Willows passage, hunting Peter. He senses not only Peter's presence but his magical identity, a thing that mere smell or sight cannot fully convey. He does not mistake Ron for the animagus. He knows. There is something else, something unseen that guides him, a magical awareness that cuts through flesh and fur alike. Moreover, consider the Triwizard Tournament. During the third task, Harry, facing the obstacles of the Enchanted Maze, is watched by Animagus Rita Skeeter, who has illegally transformed into a beetle. She flits silently, hidden from charms and wards, even those crafted by the Ministry itself. But how did she find the perfect vantage point? How did she time her intrusion so precisely? Unless she could feel the resonance of spell, the shimmer of magical boundaries, her positioning defies logic. These examples suggest that Animagi, while stripped of wands and incantations, are not stripped of their arcane instincts. Magic in the Harry Potter universe is not solely the domain of the wand. It flows through the wizard, a current, a pulse, a language of the soul. If the soul remains, and it must, for Animagi retain their human minds, then surely some magic flows too. The question then evolves, is the magical perception of an animagus merely dulled, or is it transformed into something bestial, primal, but no less acute? Let us speculate with a hypothetical scenario. Suppose an animagus, say Minerva McGonagall in her tabby cat form, enters a room where a powerful enchantment has been cast, perhaps the protective charms of 12 Grimmauld Place. Would she feel it? Would her feline form arch its back instinctively at the presence of such layered spells, even before understanding their nature? We must assume she would. The text implies that McGonagall, even in cat form, can sense danger and deception. In Philosopher's Stone, she sits on the wall outside Privet Drive as a cat, waiting for Dumbledore. She watches the Dursleys. She judges them. She chooses to wait in animal form because it gives her an advantage. She is less noticed, but not less aware. What would be the use of such a disguise if she could not sense her surroundings? This leads to a darker possibility, one that feels ripped from the folds of espionage and war. Could an animagus in animal form detect magical protections, track a person's magical signature, and even sense the activation of spells? Imagine the implications. A sparrow flits across the Hogwarts grounds, senses the protective wards and relays this information to Death Eaters. A snake slithers through the Forbidden Forest, tracing the scent of Patronus magic. If true, then Animagi are not merely observers. They are magical sensors, spies. But can they feel pain from magic? Let us examine the unforgivable curses. Avada Kedavra kills instantly. Whether one is man or mouse, it ends all. But what of Imperio? Could an animagus resist its control? Could the mind of a human wizard, hidden beneath layers of animal instinct, rebel against magical domination? Barty Crouch Jr., under the influence of the curse for years, still found moments of defiance. Is it so hard to believe that an animagus, even in animal shape, might do the same? The answer lies perhaps in the difference between physical and magical vulnerability. An animagus may not wield a wand, but they are not without defense. Their magic is within. It is the magic of transformation, of identity held in flux. This inner core might shield them, or at least allow them to sense when magic is near, like the way one feels a storm in their bones before the sky darkens. Remus Lupin once said, "You're not a bad person. You're a very good person who bad things have happened to." He was not speaking of Animagi, but of Harry's nature, yet it fits. Animagi are not inherently different. They are the same souls in new forms, and if magic is tied to soul, then the capacity to sense it must remain. Let us look one final time to Peter Pettigrew. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, when he is unmasked, he pleads, he begs. But before that, as a rat, he panics. He reacts to the return of Sirius and Remus not with instinct, but with knowledge. He senses the rising magical tension. He scurries, he flees. This is not the fear of a rodent. This is the fear of a man who knows magic is coming. So perhaps the truth is simple, hidden in plain sight. Animagi do feel magic, not as we do, not with words or wands, but with something older, like wolves sensing danger, like birds riding the currents of unseen winds. They feel it in their fur, their feathers, their skin, and that, more than anything, is why they are dangerous, not because they can transform, but because in transforming they become something new, a creature of magic without casting a single spell. Number 17. Does being an animagus affect lifespan? In the quiet corners of magical history, where dusty books rarely open and portraits fall into slumber, there exists a question that has never been officially answered by the Ministry of Magic or even the esteemed scholars of St. Mungo's. It is the kind of question whispered among Ravenclaw prefects in the library or passed along in scribbled notes at the back of the Hogwarts archives. Does becoming an animagus alter the lifespan of a witch or wizard? Animagus magic is not a simple spell. It is a commitment, a transformation of the deepest kind. Unlike Polyjuice Potion, which merely imitates another body, animagus transformation is the rewiring of one's magical essence to adopt an entirely separate physical identity. It is rare, dangerous, and heavily regulated. The transformation is not a one-time act, but an ability acquired and used at will. With such frequent and fundamental changes in physical form, it is only logical to ask, what is the price? The most famous Animagi of recent history are perhaps the Marauders, James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew. Each of them, as students, managed to accomplish what most trained wizards never dare. They learned to become animals. James was a stag, Sirius a dog, and Pettigrew a rat. Their goal was noble, to keep Remus Lupin company during his werewolf transformations. Yet this gift came with no recorded consequences, at least none we read about in the official biographies, but perhaps we simply did not look closely enough. Sirius Black is an important case. He spent 12 years in Azkaban, surviving where others went mad. The official ministry reports attribute his mental clarity and eventual escape to sheer willpower, but there is a pattern worth noting. Sirius frequently shifted into his animagus form during imprisonment. The Dementors, repelled by animal emotions, were less effective against his dog state, but the toll on his body was unmistakable. When we see him again in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, he is gaunt, aged beyond his years, a shell of the man he once was. Certainly Azkaban contributed to this decay, but was it only Azkaban? James Potter died young, and thus we cannot analyze his lifespan. But Sirius, though he was only in his late 30s when he fell through the veil in the Department of Mysteries, had the physical appearance of someone at least 2 decades older. His hair was streaked with grey, his skin pale and sunken. Could repeated transformations, particularly under emotional duress, have accelerated his physical deterioration? Peter Pettigrew is another telling example. He lived for over 12 years as a rat, not merely using the form temporarily, but fully embracing it day and night, year after year. As Scabbers, he was passed through families, living under furniture, in shadows, eating scraps. When he returned to his human form, he was notably warped. His features were rodent-like, fingers twisted, eyes beady. The books describe him as stooped and shabby-looking, and there's a clear suggestion that his time as an animal had left permanent marks on his body. This supports the theory that living in animal form may have degenerative effects on human physiology. Rita Skeeter, an unregistered animagus, offers another angle. As a beetle, she spied on unsuspecting victims, extracting secrets without consent. Her ability allowed her to escape detection, but it is also worth noting that even after being exposed by Hermione, she never returned to prominence. There's no evidence that she suffered physically, but we must remember her transformations were brief, and she did not live in her beetle form for years. The frequency and duration of her shifts may have kept the toll minimal. But what happens on a magical cellular level when a witch or wizard changes form? According to ancient magical theory, every living being carries a magical signature, a blueprint of their essence. Changing this essence, even temporarily, requires tremendous magical energy. Repeated transformations mean repeated restructuring of bones, organs, blood, senses. A wizard who turns into a bird must replace hands with wings, lungs with air sacs, eyes with the capacity to see ultraviolet light. Then, in an instant, they return to their original form. Could this constant rewriting, this magical metabolism, lead to a form of accelerated aging? Magizoologists have long studied magical creatures for clues. In Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Newt Scamander briefly discusses the magical properties of certain shape-shifting beasts, such as the Animagi and the Kelpie. These creatures, unlike Animagi, are born with shifting abilities. Their bodies are biologically adapted to change. Wizards, however, are not. When they force themselves into new forms, they may be introducing instability into their magical cores. One obscure study in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library, Transfiguration and Transmutation, Long-Term Consequences of Bodily Shifts, suggests that witches and wizards who specialize in heavy transfiguration magic often show signs of magical exhaustion in later years. Symptoms include unstable wand behavior, shortened tempers, and even spontaneous magical discharges. While the study is based on broader transfiguration, animagus magic is arguably its most intense and intimate form. Another layer of complexity lies in the nature of the animal form itself. Animals, in the magical world, have different natural lifespans. Rats live a few years, stags up to 2 decades, dogs perhaps a bit longer. If a wizard chooses an animal form and inhabits it frequently, are they anchoring themselves to a different biological clock? When Peter lived as a rat, did his body adapt to a rat's metabolism, its quicker aging? Did he, in some way, age faster in those 12 years than he would have in human form? Interestingly, some ancient Animagi may offer a contrary viewpoint. Circe, the legendary Greek sorceress, was rumored to be an animagus who took the form of a lioness. Her writings, preserved in fragments and quoted in ancient magic and mysticism, claim that those who embrace the beast may outlast the man. It is possible that long-term transformation grants not decay but preservation, provided it is done with harmony and not desperation. The key may lie in the attitude of the transformation. Sirius transformed out of pain and necessity, Peter out of fear, Circe, if the legends are true, transformed out of reverence. Could the intention behind the transformation affect its outcome? In many magical traditions, willpower is the binding agent between the spell and the soul. If the transformation is born of fear, it may corrode. If born of balance, it may strengthen. There's also the role of magical energy itself. Hogwarts students are warned not to attempt animagus training without strict supervision, partly because failed transformations can be catastrophic. But even successful transformations repeated too often may draw on one's magical reserves. Wizards are not inexhaustible sources of power. And if the magical body is constantly channeled toward physical redefinition, how much remains for healing, protection, or resilience? Curiously, we never hear of elderly Animagi, not in the current ministry registry nor in the old records. The registered Animagi of the 20th century, including Minerva McGonagall, are often quiet about their practice. McGonagall, who transformed into a cat with square-shaped spectacles, did not appear to suffer physically from her transformations, but she was known to reserve the magic for rare and specific moments. She was disciplined, controlled. Her physical appearance remained youthful for her age, sharp and commanding. Was this the result of cautious use, of experience refined over decades? The case of McGonagall also supports the theory that animagus magic, if mastered and used with restraint, may actually preserve the body. Her movements as a cat were elegant, agile, smooth. It's possible that those graceful transitions between forms helped maintain muscular balance, joint flexibility, and magical awareness. Unlike Sirius or Peter, she never relied on her transformation for survival. She used it as a tool, not a refuge. There's also a philosophical question at play. Does becoming an animal, again and again, alter one's soul? In wizarding philosophy, the soul is deeply connected to the body. Fragmenting it, as in the case of Horcruxes, leads to corruption. Changing the body repeatedly may not tear the soul, but it might stretch it, and stretched things are more likely to tear. Some scholars suggest that Animagi exist in a liminal state, neither fully human nor fully animal. The longer they spend in both worlds, the harder it becomes to define their core identity. This psychological blurring may not age the body, but it can erode the mind. Peter's paranoia, Sirius's recklessness, even Rita Skeeter's voyeurism. Could these be symptoms of identity instability? In magical lore, the Animagus Registry exists to keep such transformations monitored, not merely for safety, but perhaps because there is a quiet, ancient fear that the longer one walks with paws or wings, the further they drift from their original self. Like a dream that becomes too real, a transformation indulged too often may seduce the wizard into forgetting they were ever human at all. Still, the question remains, does Animagus magic shorten life or extend it? The answer is elusive, as so many magical truths are. It is not in the spells nor the form, but in the intent, the discipline, and the soul of the caster. Used recklessly, it may burn life like dry parchment in dragonfire. Used wisely, it may protect and preserve like phoenix tears. What is certain is this: every animagus leaves behind a trace, not just in the ministry ledger, but in their bones, their gaze, their voice. Something in them becomes both more and less than human. Whether this duality grants them longer years or shortens their time, it always changes them. And in the world of magic, change is rarely without cost. Number 18. What happens if an animagus transforms into an extinct animal? The fog clung to the Scottish Highlands like a forgotten spell, heavy and unmoving. Few dared to venture into the ancient woods north of Pitlochry, and those who did rarely spoke of what they had seen. Whispers in the wizarding world told of a shadow larger than any bear, with tusks gleaming like polished ivory, and eyes that held centuries of knowledge. Some said it was a memory from the Ice Age come to life. Others, more learned, wondered if it was something far rarer, a magical being whose form defied the boundaries of recorded nature. Animagi, by their very nature, are exceptional witches and wizards. They perform complex magic to take on an animal form, a transformation that is both deeply personal and tied to their magical core. Traditionally, these forms are living animals, cats, dogs, stags, beetles, or birds. But what if the soul of a wizard is so ancient or so steeped in forgotten magic that their form emerges not as something of the present, but of the past? What if an animagus could become an extinct animal? Consider this. Magic predates time as we understand it. Before the Ministry of Magic, before even the founding of Hogwarts, there were those who shaped the world with spells spoken in tongues long buried. The first recorded animagus in wizarding history is thought to be Lisette du Lac, a French sorceress who transformed into a white swan in 1291, but nowhere in the official texts does it state that an animagus must be an animal known to current magical or muggle classification. It is only assumed, and assumptions in the magical world are often dangerous things. An animagus form is not chosen. It reveals itself in the process of transformation, emerging as a reflection of the wizard's deepest identity. As Minerva McGonagall once explained during a rare discussion on the subject, "You do not choose the animal chooses you in a sense. It is a manifestation of your essence." But what if that essence resonates not with creatures of today, but with those that once walked the earth before memory? In 1743, the renowned magical naturalist Caliban Thorne recorded a strange sighting in the remote forests of Russia. He wrote of a creature with teeth like silver blades, moving through the snow without leaving tracks, its breath steaming like cauldrons in winter air. Decades later, hidden in the restricted section of the British Library of Magic, one finds a letter written by Thorne to his colleague, stating, "I believe I have seen a saber-tooth, but not a beast, not truly. The way it moved, It had a man's mind behind those eyes. This was dismissed, of course. Thorne was said to have succumbed to madness late in life, but recent discoveries in the Department of Mysteries suggest otherwise. Among the artifacts sealed in the Hall of Lost Transformations is a preserved set of robes burned around the hem as if scorched by magical energy. Inside the pocket was a talon, not fossilized, but fresh. DNA testing by St. Mungo's healers in cooperation with magical zoologists revealed it matched no known living species. Some whispered it belonged to a terror bird, Phorus rhacos, long believed extinct. Others thought it might be a basilisk's cousin, though no one dared test further. If a witch or wizard could indeed become an extinct animal, it opens unsettling possibilities. It means magic is not bound by the biological timeline that governs Muggle science. It suggests that Animagus forms are drawn not from a species registry, but from a vast, timeless pool of magical memory. A soul might echo the heartbeat of a mammoth or the flight of an Argentavis. The ancient bird whose wings could shadow a village. And if this is true, then some Animagi may walk unseen among us, their animal forms so alien they are mistaken for myth. Take the case of Morven MacAirth, a little-known Scottish warlock who disappeared in 1382. Known for his eccentric views on time and reincarnation, he was obsessed with becoming one with the first spirits of the earth. Some dismissed him as a mystic, others feared his power. His disappearance was presumed to be self-imposed exile, but centuries later a group of young hikers reported seeing a shaggy grey beast the size of a cottage drinking from a loch near Ben Nevis. It vanished without a trace, leaving only massive, circular prints in the mud. Prints later found to match the reconstructed foot of a woolly mammoth. Some magical scholars, particularly those aligned with the Merlinic Society, argue that such transformations are impossible, that magic requires a living template. But this position has been increasingly challenged by those studying the ties between memory and magic. The late Batilda Bagshot hinted at the possibility in A History of Magic, writing, "Magic is not merely an art of the present, but a dialogue with what once was. In some cases, a wizard may channel ancient resonance so deeply it reawakens a shape long believed gone." Animagi are not bound by physical proximity or visibility. The transformation is governed by internal truths, not external biology. This is why Sirius Black could become a dog without ever having studied them, and why James Potter's stag emerged fully formed without instruction. The animal already lived within them. So what if the soul of a wizard is inexplicably linked to something older, older than human memory, older than written language? In 1928, during the International Confederation of Wizards, an incident occurred that was quickly erased from official records. A French delegate, Madame Clarisse Vaillant, collapsed during a heated debate about magical legislation. Witnesses later reported seeing a winged shadow burst through the ceiling and vanish into the night sky. It was never found. Months later, Auros tracking illegal portkey activity in the Pyrenees stumbled upon an abandoned stone hut. Inside, carved into the wall in blood, "Je suis toujours là. Ils m'ont oublié, mais la magie me connaît encore." I'm still here. They forgot me, but magic still knows me. Some believe Madame Vaillant had become something monstrous or magnificent. Rubeus Hagrid, in his years of teaching care of magical creatures, often alluded to beasts no longer officially recognized by the ministry. "There's more out there than you'll find in your textbooks," he once told a class. "Old creatures, big uns, some say they're dead. I say they're just sleeping or hiding from the muggles." He never elaborated, but rumours spread of sightings in the Forbidden Forest. A figure seen only in silhouettes with long claws and eyes that glowed green even when no lumos was cast. The implications are staggering. If an animagus becomes an extinct creature, could they also become one presumed mythological? Could someone manifest as a dragon without being part of the draconian species? Or a phoenix? Not the commonly known type like Fawkes, but a lost variation from Persian legend whose feathers cured madness. What boundaries define the magical self? The magical world already accepts that time travel, though dangerous, is possible. Memory charms can alter reality. Horcruxes defy death. Given all this, is it truly so unbelievable that one's soul might manifest through the echo of a long-extinct being, especially if that creature held special magical properties now forgotten? Professor Bathsheba Babbling of Ancient Runes once proposed that some runes were not simply symbols of power, but representations of ancestral animals. The rune Awaz, long interpreted as horse, may have originally meant something closer to beast of ancient alignment. What if some Animagi connect to those older meanings, not the sanitized ones now taught in Hogwarts classrooms? There's one more story. Buried in the Department of Mysteries, sealed under a classification code, only 3 unspeakables are authorized to access. It is called the Caligo Protocol, and it concerns a single photograph recovered from the ruins of a German wizarding academy destroyed during Grindelwald's rise. In the image, a young girl stands smiling beside what appears to be a thylacine, a Tasmanian tiger. Yet the date is 1992, decades after the species was declared extinct. On the back of the photo, written in shaking handwriting, she could not hide what she truly was. If such transformations are real, and increasingly the evidence suggests they are, then Animagi is not merely a branch of transfiguration. It is a doorway into magical ancestry, one that ties each wizard to the full history of the natural world. The animagus form might not only reveal what one is, but what one once was. And so the next time shadows move strangely in a forest you thought was empty, or you hear the distant cry of a creature no textbook recognizes, do not dismiss it too quickly. It may not be your imagination. It may be a wizard, older than time, cloaked in the body of a forgotten beast, walking through the pages of history, alive, breathing, and unseen. Perhaps in the cold mist of dawn, a giant bird watches Hogwarts from above, its wings carrying the weight of 1,000 years. Perhaps it is not a bird at all. Perhaps it is a child of magic, shaped in the age before magic had a name. And if you listen closely, you might hear it whisper, not with words, but with memory. Number 19. Do Animagi have animal instincts? When Sirius Black transformed into Padfoot, a great black dog with intelligent eyes and a powerful bristling presence, he did more than change shape. He became something primal. During the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, he didn't just fight, he snarled. He moved like a beast. He protected Harry Potter, not like a man would protect a friend, but as a canine would guard its pup. In that moment, Padfoot wasn't just a disguise. He was Sirius, and yet he was not. This merging of human intellect and animal instinct lies at the heart of animagus transformation. The Ministry of Magic classifies it as advanced, dangerous magic, requiring exacting precision and registration to avoid disastrous outcomes. But what is often whispered behind closed doors, yet rarely spoken aloud, is the question that haunts the edges of this practice. Do Animagi absorb more than just the physical shape of the creature? Do they inherit something deeper, something that cannot be shrugged off like fur? Consider Peter Pettigrew, a coward in human form, and fittingly, a rat in his animagus guise. It wasn't just for stealth that he chose this form. It reflected something innate. His behavior, even when not transformed, mirrored the creature he became. Small, sneaky, alert to danger, and prone to sudden bolts of fear, Pettigrew did not need to become a rat to exhibit rodent traits. But it is worth questioning whether those instincts intensified when he changed. In the shrieking shack, when confronted by Sirius and Remus, he squealed and grovelled like a cornered rodent. Was it his human fear, or had his years as a rat permanently fused with his human psychology? The process of becoming an animagus is said to be controllable. One must practice the spell, master the transformation, and understand the creature's anatomy and mind. But how much of the animal mind can be truly understood by a wizard? It is not simply mimicry. Professor McGonagall, one of the most revered animagi, transforms into a tabby cat. Though her animagus form has the square spectacles imprint and a stern feline demeanour, it is not hard to imagine the quiet calculation of a stalking predator hidden beneath her composed exterior. A cat, while elegant, is territorial and solitary. Does she ever feel the urge to stalk, to lash out? Or has she mastered it, tamed the instincts of the cat through years of discipline? But not all animals are as restrained as a domestic feline. What happens when the chosen form is a creature of violence or unbridled instinct? What if the form is a predator? The ministry, careful to avoid public fear, does not release the full registry of Animagi, and for good reason. Rumors persist of a wizard who chose to become a lion and was never seen in his human form again. Another chose the form of a bear, only to maul a fellow wizard in what was described as a momentary lapse in control. These stories are hushed, labelled as unconfirmed or blamed on werewolves, but the fear lingers. Instinct is not simply action, it is reaction without thought. A dog growls before it processes fear. A rat flees before it understands threat. A wolf attacks to defend its pack, even if the threat is imagined. If an animagus fully embodies the form, skeletal structure, muscles, eyes, tail, can we truly believe that only the body transforms? The brain changes, the senses shift, the world smells, feels, and sounds different. Emotion no longer flows through words, but through scent and posture. What does that do to the wizard's sense of self? Remus Lupin, though not an animagus but a werewolf, once described the experience of transformation as losing himself entirely. "It is very painful," he told Harry. "You have no idea." His mind disappeared, leaving only rage and hunger. Though his condition was lycanthropy, not voluntary magic, it reveals something terrifying, that the boundary between man and beast is thinner than we'd like to believe. Animagi are not immune to this shift, they simply step across it willingly. During the events of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Sirius in his animagus form leapt between the curse and Harry, he did not hesitate. Was it courage or instinct? Was it Padfoot defending his pack? A canine's loyalty is absolute, but it is also thoughtless. It acts before understanding. That moment led to Sirius's death. Some would argue it was noble. Others might wonder, did the dog's instinct override the man's caution? The laws surrounding animagus transformations are riddled with restrictions, and yet there is little documentation on how prolonged transformations affect the wizard's psyche. Pettigrew spent over 12 years as a rat. He slept, ate, and existed among animals. When he returned to his human form, he was broken. He sniffed, he scratched, he stammered. His fear was no longer human, it was ingrained. Was that cowardice amplified by his rat form, or had the rat become a permanent part of who he was? In the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, there are confidential files not open to the public. One, according to a former unspeakable who spoke under the name Clericus, details a case in which an animagus, unregistered, took the form of a hawk. Over time, he lost the ability to speak as a man. He would perch silently in the rafters of the ministry's interrogation room, watching with unblinking eyes. When questioned, he gave no answers. He simply stared. Clericus described him as more bird than man, more instinct than thought. They say he never returned to human form. Such transformations are not without consequence. The very act of surrendering one's human body to that of a creature, even temporarily, requires a surrender of control. One must yield. It is this yielding that opens the door to the animal mind. In this space, buried under feathers or fur, is the risk of forgetting the human voice. The most dangerous cases come from those who transform into animals with naturally aggressive behaviors. A wizard who becomes a wildcat cannot help but twitch at movement. A shark animagus once reportedly attacked a fellow wizard during a training session drawn by the scent of blood from a minor wound. He swam circles for hours afterward, unable to shake the hunger. The case was buried, like many others, under ministry bureaucratic language. There is a reason why the training to become an animagus takes years. A single mistake during the process can result in irreversible consequences. A botched transformation might leave behind remnants of the creature, ears, tails, or worse, instincts that do not fade. There are confirmed cases of partial transformations becoming permanent. The ministry refers to them as irreversible imprints, but among Animagi they are called ghost instincts, the urge to bite, to flee, to hunt, even in human form. One of the most unsettling examples is that of Matilda Greaves, a brilliant young witch who transformed into a lynx. Initially successful, her abilities were praised at Hogwarts, but over time she began to withdraw from others, sleeping during the day and pacing at night. When questioned, she could not explain why she felt the need to watch others from the shadows. She eventually vanished from the magical world entirely. Her wand was found in the Scottish Highlands, scratched and broken beneath the paw prints of a large feline. These stories raise uncomfortable questions. Is the transformation reversible in spirit or only in flesh? Can a person spend too long inside the mind of a beast and return unchanged? The deeper implication is that magic, while powerful, is not always kind. It can awaken forces within a person that even the strongest cannot suppress. Animagi, by nature, are rare. Not because the spell is impossible, but because the price of mastery is high. It requires knowledge, patience, and above all, an iron grip on one's identity. The animal will always tempt with its simplicity, act, react, survive. Humans are burdened by thought, guilt, hesitation. The animal is not. One might recall Rita Skeeter, the notorious journalist who used her unregistered beetle form to spy on others. Her behavior, even in human form, was insect-like, creeping, hiding, listening through cracks. Did she become a beetle because she was nosy, or did becoming a beetle make her worse? The answer may lie in her writing, quick, biting, buzzing from one scandal to the next. She may have never truly shed the exoskeleton. In the end, the question remains whether a wizard in animal form is still fully a wizard. The ministry says yes. The registries say yes, but the stories, the silences, the disappearances, they whisper something else. That within every transformation there is a risk of becoming lost, of letting go, the most tragic part. It's not always visible. Animagi may walk among others, smiling, speaking, laughing, but sometimes when the full moon rises, not for werewolves but for their own reasons, they feel a twitch in their muscles, a growl in their throat, a shiver that is not cold. They remember, they long, and in those quiet moments they are not quite man, not quite beast, but something in between. Number 20. Can someone be forcibly turned into an animagus? There are dark corners of magical history that few dare to explore. Among them, perhaps none is more unsettling than the twisted possibility that a wizard or witch could be forcibly turned into an animagus, transfigured not through study or will, but by coercion, manipulation, or something far more sinister. Animagi are celebrated in magical society for their skill, their control, and their rare ability. But what happens when that control is stripped away? What if a wizard is cursed into becoming a creature he did not choose, perhaps even something humiliating or dangerous or tragically insignificant? In the official curriculum at Hogwarts, the transformation into an animagus is taught as nearly impossible to master without years of training and absolute intent. Minerva McGonagall, a registered animagus herself, once described the transformation as a deeply personal bond between wizard and inner animal, and the process involves significant risk. The Ministry of Magic tightly regulates Animagi, and their forms are registered in an official ledger held within the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. But nowhere, in any book, lecture, or decree, does it mention what happens when the transformation is not voluntary. Whispers circulate in certain old magical families, especially those aligned with the darker arts, that the animagus ritual can be manipulated. The standard process involves the daily holding of a mandrake leaf in one's mouth for a full month, among other rituals. However, some believe that if this process is twisted, if the potion is corrupted or cursed, an animagus transformation can be forced upon someone. The intended animal form is no longer a reflection of the soul, but a cruel invention of the spellcaster's will. A chilling example emerges from the reign of Gellert Grindelwald. Deep in the mountains of Albania, his followers reportedly conducted experiments on prisoners, failed revolutionaries, political dissidents, and those who defied his rising order. One man, identified only as Thorn, was said to have been forcibly transformed into a moth, not an elegant hawk or a fierce predator, but a fragile, trembling moth that beat its wings against the glass of a tiny jar until it finally perished. The records of this incident were erased, but fragments appear in the journal of Batilda Bagshot, who noted, "Some magic, once performed, tears not only at the flesh, but at the identity." Turning an enemy into a beast or insect isn't merely transfiguration, it crosses into the territory of soul manipulation. Wizards have long debated whether the animalgous form reflects one's nature or merely one's subconscious. Yet if that form can be assigned against the person's will, the implications are horrifying. It suggests the destruction of identity, the rearrangement of a soul's essence by force. This is not animagus magic, it is mutilation. The concept is not purely academic. During the First Wizarding War, an obscure Auror named Sylvain Roll, a distant relative of the infamous Death Eater Thorfinn Roll, filed a private report in 1976. The document detailed a case involving a suspected Death Eater named Iona Vladan. She was captured and later found dead in Azkaban under strange circumstances. What made the case remarkable was the evidence found in her cell. Feathers, not human hair, were scattered across the stone floor, and a broken eggshell was discovered in the corner. According to Roll's notes, her mind may have snapped before the body did, or perhaps her form was taken from her altogether. None of this was ever made public. The Ministry of Magic quickly classified Raoul's report, and he was quietly reassigned to a desk job. He died 2 years later in a supposed accident involving a cursed doorknob. Some believe he came too close to something the ministry wanted buried, but why such secrecy? Because if it were known that a person could be turned into an animal by force, the moral foundations of the magical community would be shaken. The laws surrounding magical rights and protections are built on the assumption of autonomy. Animagi, werewolves, even those under the influence of polyjuice potion, all these transformations require consent or are considered tragic accidents. A deliberate act of transformation against someone's will would not only be a crime, it would be a violation of the natural order. Yet there are dark spells that flirt with this possibility. The Half-Blood Prince's annotations in the margins of advanced potion making mention Transmutatio Vivens, a spell that functions like an inversion of the Animagus ritual where the caster chooses the form and imposes it. No instructions are provided, only a cryptic line. To cast this is to claim the soul as raw material. Whether this is a warning or an incantation is unclear. Even within canon, we are reminded of how little is truly known about the animagus process. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius Black explains how he, James, and Peter became Animagi in secret, never registering with the ministry. "It took them the best part of 3 years to work out how to do it," Sirius said. "Your father and I managed it in the end." If the process can be self-taught, who's to say it can't also be corrupted? Perhaps the most tragic theoretical case is that of Peter Pettigrew. Though he transformed willingly into a rat to evade justice, one might argue that his very soul had become so twisted and submissive that his transformation was not a choice but a compulsion, an internal coercion rooted in fear. Rats are symbols of betrayal, survival, and cowardice. But what if someone like Pettigrew had been forced into that form by a more powerful wizard? Would we view him as the coward we know, or the victim of a magical crime that altered his very being? During Voldemort's second rise to power, a small and obscure incident occurred in Nocturne Alley. A beetle was found in a glass jar in Borgin and Burke's. A mere curiosity, it was sold to a collector who noted that it seemed oddly intelligent. The beetle, it was said, would tap against the glass in rhythms, arrange tiny crumbs into patterns, and once appeared to try to spell out words. Months later, Rita Skeeter resurfaced with a best-selling exposé about the Death Eaters, but refused to explain her disappearance. It's widely believed she spent that time trapped in her animagus form, held against her will. If even a trained animagus can be imprisoned and stripped of agency, what chance does a forcibly transformed one have? We are left with disturbing questions. What is the limit of transfiguration when fueled by dark intent? Can the line between transformation and torture be erased entirely? If so, then a human being could be trapped forever in the body of a fly, a worm, or a slug, not just transformed, but broken. Imagine a mind unraveling as weeks turn to months inside a jar, your voice reduced to a buzz, your thoughts slowly drifting from memory to instinct. There are legends in Romania of the whispering cages, ancient iron bird cages hidden deep in the Carpathian forests. According to local law, they contain animals that were once human, warlocks punished by rival clans now chirping aimlessly for eternity. One such story tells of a man named Mircea Dolinsky, whose cage still hangs near a forgotten monastery. The monks say the bird within never sleeps and never eats, only sings mournfully each night. The cage is sealed with runes no one dares translate. Such tales are easy to dismiss as myth, but what if the reason no one speaks of this practice is precisely because it is real? What if the ministry has silenced reports, not out of disbelief, but fear? The act of forcibly turning a human into an animal may not be impossible. It may be the darkest of lost arts, hidden in plain sight, preserved by those who know its power and dare not use it. In the Department of Mysteries, there is a room that remains permanently locked. Hermione Granger once speculated, that room's supposed to contain the power of love. But others, more cynical, whisper that it contains things far more terrible. Perhaps one of those things is a memory stored in a pensieve of a forced transformation, a warning, a relic of magic so perverse that it could not be destroyed, only hidden. In the end, the ethical implications are staggering. Magic has always required balance, intent, consent, and consequence. If even one wizard has been transformed against their will into an animal, then the boundary between transfiguration and dark magic is thinner than anyone admits. The true fear is not that it can be done, but that it has been done, and those stories have been buried. Somewhere, deep in the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, there may be files sealed in black wax, stamped with the highest level of secrecy, that describe unregistered animal transformations with no trace of how they occurred. The staff call them phantoms. Some are dismissed as accidents, others simply disappear. But one report, dated 1983, describes an owl found delivering blank letters for years. When it was finally captured and examined, its eyes were human. It screamed when touched with a wand. That scream was never explained. The owl was destroyed, the file was closed, and the ministry never spoke of it again. Number 21, can Animagi speak while in animal form? There's a strange and eerie moment in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban when a black dog pounces on Harry, dragging him into the shrieking shack. The dog, wild and frenzied, transforms seconds later into Sirius Black. For most readers, the transformation is magical and thrilling, but it hides a much quieter, overlooked question. During all his years as a dog, did Sirius ever try to speak? Throughout the series, Animagi are portrayed as silent in their animal forms. We see Sirius as Padfoot, Peter Pettigrew as Wormtail the rat, and Professor McGonagall as a tabby cat with distinctive spectacle-like markings. Not once do any of them utter a word while transformed. But does that mean they can't speak, or simply that they choose not to? To understand this, we must examine what it means to be an animagus. According to the Tales of Beedle the Bard and references within the series, becoming an animagus is a rigorous, dangerous magical process that allows a witch or wizard to transform into an animal at will while retaining their human intellect. That last point is key. The human mind survives inside the animal. They are not mindless beasts. They are wizards and witches inside fur, feathers, or scales, and yet we never hear a word from them. Consider Professor McGonagall. Her animagus form is introduced in the very first chapter of the series. A stern-looking cat sits on a wall, observing Privet Drive. When Dumbledore addresses her by name, the cat leaps down, transforms, and replies in her crisp Scottish accent. It's all very matter-of-fact, but it raises the question, why didn't the cat speak first? Was she unable, or did she simply refrain out of preference or discipline? The case of Sirius Black offers more ambiguity. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius lives as a dog for nearly a year, hiding in alleyways, scavenging food, and occasionally watching over Harry. In that entire time, he does not attempt to communicate verbally. Yet when he transforms, he immediately speaks, sometimes frantically. We also learn he has written messages using stolen quills and parchment. If he retained full mental faculties, why not bark out a single word to someone he trusted? Could the structure of the animal body prevent speech? Human speech requires intricate control of the larynx, tongue, lips, and breath. Most animals, especially dogs and cats, lack the same vocal structure. A dog's bark is produced differently from a human's speech, so perhaps the anatomical limitations prevent proper articulation. But what about birds? If an animagus were a parrot, for instance, would speech be more feasible? Imagine an animagus who transforms into a raven. Ravens are notoriously intelligent. They mimic human speech with surprising clarity. If the wizard inside retained control, perhaps the mimicry could be improved. One might even imagine a raven animagus whispering dark secrets from the rafters of the Ministry of Magic. Yet we never hear of any such cases in canon. This silence may be more than anatomical. There's a possibility that the animagus transformation is enchanted in such a way that suppresses speech as a failsafe. Consider the potential dangers. If Animagi could speak fluently in animal form, their secret identities would be easily betrayed. Imagine Peter Pettigrew as a rat, squeaking out names in his sleep. The risk of exposure would be too high, so perhaps the magic itself includes a silencing component, not on the mind, but on the voice. The example of Rita Skeeter deepens the mystery. Rita, a notorious journalist, is revealed to be an unregistered animagus who transforms into a beetle. Hermione captures her in a jar and blackmails her into silence. It is never mentioned whether the beetle speaks. In fact, a speaking beetle would have immediately compromised her cover. One might argue that as a beetle, Rita had no proper mouth to form words. An anatomical barrier, again. But what if speech isn't blocked, merely distorted? There's an unsettling idea that an animagus might attempt speech only to produce guttural, half-human sounds that no one recognizes as language. Imagine a dog barking with strange rhythm, almost forming syllables but ultimately sounding deranged. The animal body might not be able to carry human thoughts into sound. They might force the air through unfamiliar vocal cords, resulting in grotesque, broken murmurs. Could that have happened? Picture this. During Sirius's time in hiding, he hears a ministry official approaching a child in a dark alley. The official is no friend to the child. Sirius wants to help, but cannot risk transforming in public. In desperation, he attempts to warn them. The dog opens its mouth and snarls out something approximating, "Stop!" The syllables are mangled. The official turns, sees a feral dog and runs. The child is saved, but no one believes their story. "The dog said something, I swear it." A myth is born, but without proof, it's discarded as fantasy. Dumbledore once said, "The truth is a beautiful and terrible thing, and should therefore be treated with great caution." Perhaps this is why the magical world doesn't encourage public knowledge about the limits of Animagi. The more mysterious the transformation, the safer the secret. There's also a question of control. Animagus magic is unique in that it relies heavily on the mental state of the witch or wizard. If a person loses focus or becomes too immersed in the instincts of their animal form, they risk behaving more like the animal than a human. Sirius never chased sticks, but he did growl and bite. Pettigrew in rat form scurried and squealed. Perhaps the human mind is preserved, but instincts bleed in. And with them, the inability or unwillingness to speak. What if some Animagi tried and failed? There may be cases buried in ministry records, sealed reports of Animagi who attempted speech and went mad. Wizards whose transformations resulted in fractured identities, half beast, half human, trapped between two worlds, unable to make either one understand them. These would not be stories celebrated in the Daily Prophet. They'd be hidden away in the Department of Mysteries, alongside the other unsolved questions of magical science. There's also a social factor. The wizarding community has a deep-rooted reverence for silence in magic. Speaking in animal form might be considered taboo, a perversion of the sacred transformation, the unspoken rule. If you become a beast, be a beast. Speak only when you walk on two legs. Anything else is unnatural, but nature is full of outliers. Consider the magical creature known as the Sphinx. It has the body of a lion and the voice of a woman. Or the centaur whose horse-like form coexists with fluent speech. Why then should a transformed witch or wizard be silenced while a half-breed can recite poetry? Maybe animagus magic doesn't prohibit speech. Maybe it demands mastery. Only those with exceptional control could manipulate their animal vocal cords to mimic human language, like a pianist coaxing melody from a broken instrument. Perhaps there was once an animagus who achieved it, a talking owl, wise and ancient, who whispered to the headmaster in the tower. But their story was lost, buried in time. We must also consider the Marauder's map. Created by 4 highly skilled teenage wizards, including 2 known Animagi, the map recognizes and names everyone at Hogwarts, regardless of form or concealment. It's clever magic, and yet even that map never reveals if an animal is speaking, it merely observes. The silence of the animal world is unbroken. In Order of the Phoenix, Sirius spends more time in dog form, slipping through shadows and sneaking out to see Harry. In all that time, he does not whisper a word. If he could have, wouldn't he have used that power to pass secret messages? To warn Harry when owls were too risky? To speak his last thoughts, perhaps, as Padfoot disappearing into the night? The absence of speech in Animagi might be a creative decision, a way for J.K. Rowling to draw a clear line between human and beast. But it also enhances the magic. In a world where spells can shatter bones and time itself can be twisted, there remains something mysterious about silence, something sacred, a boundary even magic won't cross without consequence. Still the idea lingers. A whisper in the alley, a bark too precise, a cat's meow that sounds almost like a name. And when people speak of it, they shake their heads and laugh. Impossible, they say. Animals don't talk. But what if one did? And what if, for just a moment, someone listened? Number 22. Can a wizard have 2 animagus forms? In the world of magic, transformation is not only possible, it is expected. Animagi take on animal forms, Patronuses shift with emotion, and Polyjuice Potion can trick even the closest of friends. But what if a wizard's very soul is so fractured, so unstable, or simply so complex that it manifests in 2 separate animal identities? What if one magical being harbors 2 distinct forms, each summoned by different emotional states? This idea teeters on the edge of known magical theory, but it may not be as far-fetched as one might think. The case of Marcus Nott, a lesser-known Slytherin graduate from the early 1990s, offers a tantalizing glimpse into this mystery. Nott, a distant relative of the Death Eater Theodore Nott, was never particularly outstanding in his school years, but he showed an unusual affinity for transfiguration and was known to be emotionally volatile. While studying to become an animagus in secret, something not registered with the ministry, he claimed to have achieved transformation not into one, but into 2 different creatures depending on his mood. Under calm or focused conditions, he would become a lynx, but in times of stress, fear, or uncontrolled anger, he would shift into a wolf. His claim, of course, was met with skepticism. Most wizards, even those proficient in advanced transfiguration, can only take on a single animagus form. This form is believed to be a reflection of the wizard's core essence, the deep, unchanging nature of their being. But Marcus Nott posed a challenge to this belief. His argument was based on the instability of identity, especially in individuals who have suffered trauma or inner conflict. He once described the experience as being two people trapped inside one shell, where both forms felt like home, and neither fully defined him. His case, though never formally studied by the Department of Magical Law Enforcement due to the illegal nature of his unregistered transformation, was quietly observed by Professor Minerva McGonagall. As an animagus herself, McGonagall was deeply interested in the mechanics of transformation. She reportedly wrote in correspondence to a colleague, "There is something deeply unsettling about the idea of dual animagi, but also something heartbreakingly human. If the Patronus can change with the heart, why not the body with the soul?" Indeed, the Patronus charm provides precedent for magical forms that shift with emotion. When Tonks began to fall in love with Remus Lupin, her Patronus famously changed to resemble a wolf. Dumbledore explained, "Tonks has had a change of heart. Her Patronus has changed its form." The link between emotion and transformation is well documented, though Patronuses are more malleable than animagus forms. Still, the idea that emotional volatility could affect deeper magical manifestations is not without support. Consider too the tale of Ariel Goldfinch, a witch from 18th century Edinburgh, whose Patronus would randomly alternate between a fox and a raven. At the time, magical scholars dismissed this as a form of magical interference or instability, but newer theories suggest she might have been the first recorded case of a dual-natured magical soul. Her journals, preserved in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library, detail dreams in which she would walk as both fox and bird, unable to choose which path felt more right. If such a condition were real, what might be the mechanism behind it? Some suggest the cause may lie in unresolved internal conflict. Others believe it might be linked to a rare magical condition akin to magical schizophrenia, a splitting of identity so profound that it leaves an imprint on the magical signature. In this view, the soul's magical blueprint holds two templates rather than one. From a legal standpoint, this possibility raises immense challenges. Animagi must be registered with the Ministry of Magic to prevent misuse of their abilities. A wizard capable of turning into two different animals could theoretically evade identification, prosecution, or surveillance. Imagine a criminal registered as a cat slipping into a restricted area in the form of an owl, an animal no one would suspect. The implications for law enforcement are troubling. Moreover, magical tracking spells used by the ministry depend on consistency. Once an animagus form is catalogued, it's used to bind the person to their magical registry. A dual-form wizard could theoretically escape magical trace detection altogether. Would the ministry even believe such a thing was possible? Or would they treat the second transformation as an anomaly, perhaps evidence of magical tampering or even dark magic? There is also the question of self-control. Becoming an animagus is not an automatic process. It requires extensive discipline and preparation. If a wizard were to transform involuntarily into a different animal based on emotional stress, it would suggest that the transformation is not fully under conscious control. That in itself poses dangers, not just to the wizard, but to those around them. Take the hypothetical case of Elspeth Fenwick, a young witch from Kent who studied at Beauxbaton and later at the Department of Mysteries. She was rumoured to have experienced violent shifts during emotional trauma. During her 5th year, when her brother was gravely injured by a werewolf, she reportedly collapsed and transformed spontaneously into a black bear, though previously her animagus form had been documented as a snowy hare. Her case was covered up by her family, and records are scarce, but stories still circulate among unspeakables who knew her. The magical community has long resisted theories that challenge the fundamental rules of identity. To admit that a person might have more than one true form is to unravel centuries of doctrine. Yet Hogwarts itself teaches that the self is not always singular. The sorting hat sees multiple potentialities in each student. Dumbledore once said to Harry, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are far more than our abilities. If choice defines the self, perhaps the self is not fixed, perhaps it changes, and with it, so do our magical manifestations." This brings us to the heart of the matter, identity. In a world where magical ability is tied to the soul, what happens when the soul is not whole, but multifaceted? If a person suffers trauma, betrayal, or internal conflict, might their soul reflect that duality in ways we do not yet fully understand? Could magic be, at its core, a mirror of the ever-changing self? Severus Snape offers a curious example. Though not an animagus, his Patronus, dough-shaped like Lily Potter's, remained constant even after years of torment and inner change. But what if his suffering had taken a different shape? Could he have manifested duality instead of singular devotion? This is not to suggest Snape had multiple forms, but to highlight that even the most tormented souls can express their pain in subtle, consistent magical symbols. Others, less anchored, might express it in chaos. The implications for Hogwarts education are significant. If young witches and wizards can develop dual forms, how should they be taught? How would a transfiguration professor even begin to instruct a student whose form depends on emotional volatility? Would such students need counseling, magical stabilization, or worse, containment? In the Department of Mysteries, there are whispered references to the Mirrored Soul Protocol, a study never made public, said to involve wizards whose magical reflections did not match across mirrors and patronuses. These cases were reportedly unstable and dangerous, their identities too fluid to map. If such experiments existed, they are likely buried deep within the ministry's archives or sealed forever behind locked doors. Even the concept of the Horcrux, a soul split by murder, suggests that magic recognizes and reacts to fractures in the self. Voldemort's magical power grew with each division of his soul, but so did his instability. Though he had no animagus form, his transformations were grotesque reflections of his broken humanity. Perhaps the dual animagus is a similar mirror, less horrific but equally complex. The most fascinating aspect of the dual form theory is what it reveals about magical truth. Magic, it seems, does not demand constancy. It allows for fluidity, change, even contradiction. It accepts that a person may be one thing today and another tomorrow. This is both its beauty and its danger. For a world built on laws and categories, such flexibility is hard to accept. Should the Ministry of Magic choose to recognize the possibility of dual animagi, a new registry system would be required. Training protocols would have to shift and magical surveillance recalibrated, but perhaps the hardest challenge would be cultural. The wizarding world is built on the idea that everyone has one true form, one core self. Admitting that some may have two would mean accepting that we are more complicated than we wish to believe. For Marcus Knott, now living in obscurity in northern Scotland, the question remains unresolved. He never sought fame, and after several interviews with magical researchers, he vanished from public life. But his story remains a whispered legend among certain corners of the magical community. Some believe he faked it, others claim to have seen him as both lynx and wolf. None can say for certain, and perhaps that uncertainty is the real answer. The world of magic is full of what-ifs and maybes, shadows and contradictions. The question is not whether one wizard can have two forms. The question is whether we, as a magical society, are ready to accept that the self is not always one thing. Sometimes it is two or more. And perhaps that is not a flaw, but a kind of magic all its own. Number 23. Why isn't there a school for animagus training? Of all the curious contradictions in the wizarding world, few are as baffling as the total absence of formal education in animagus transformation. For a society so deeply enamored with magical classification, registration, and academic control, the topic of Animagi remains shrouded in silence, accessible only to the most determined or the most reckless. Hogwarts, a school renowned for teaching everything from the art of divination to the intricacies of arithmancy, offers not a single official lecture club or elective course on one of the most fascinating magical disciplines, the ability to transform oneself into an animal at will. This omission, glaring in its absence, raises troubling questions about what is being hidden and why. The path to becoming an animagus is notoriously difficult, that much is clear. It involves intense preparation, precise spellwork, and unwavering discipline. The process is not just dangerous, it is irreversible if done improperly. The Ministry of Magic itself keeps a tight registry of all known Animagi, and yet it provides no assistance, no education, no resources to those who wish to pursue this path legally. It is a paradox embedded within a system that otherwise prides itself on regulation. Why deny proper training when the alternative is far worse? Consider the case of the Marauders, James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew. These three boys, barely past puberty, managed to become unregistered Animagi in secret, without guidance, without supervision, and without permission. They did it for noble reasons, to accompany their friend Remus Lupin during his werewolf transformations, but their story highlights the real danger of exclusion. When responsible students are offered no legitimate avenue, they are forced into the shadows. Hogwarts never acknowledged this feat, never questioned how they achieved it. Professor McGonagall, a registered animagus herself, offered no assistance. The silence was institutional. It is essential to remember that Minerva McGonagall, one of the most disciplined and rule-abiding witches of her generation, is a perfect example of what could be achieved with proper training. Her transformation into a tabby cat is flawless, so seamless, in fact, that she famously shocked Harry and his classmates by appearing as a cat on the desk moments before their first lesson. "That was bloody brilliant," Ron Weasley whispered in amazement. But McGonagall never taught the technique. She demonstrated it briefly and never returned to the subject again. Her silence spoke louder than words. The Ministry's registry of Animagi contains only 7 names from the 20th century, as noted in The Prisoner of Azkaban. This suggests a deliberate bottleneck, not a lack of interest, but a restriction of access. The rules are not there to prevent harm, they are there to control knowledge. Becoming an animagus requires declaring one's intent to the Ministry before the transformation is even attempted. One must then submit to surveillance, regular checks, and detailed documentation. It is bureaucracy weaponized as a deterrent. In this context, it is hardly surprising that the Marauders circumvented the system entirely. The risks of improper transformation are real. During the process, the witch or wizard must keep a mandrake leaf in their mouth for a full month, brew a complex potion, recite an incantation at a specific lunar moment, and visualize their animal form without error. Mistakes can result in partial transformation, permanent disfigurement, or madness. There are stories, some told in whispers, others buried in ministry files, and of witches who became half rabbit, half human, unable to speak, trapped between two forms, and yet instead of education, there is only silence. Silence breeds desperation. In the magical world, young witches and wizards often learn spells too powerful for their age through rumors, stolen books, or hidden notes. The restricted section of the Hogwarts library contains dark curses and dangerous knowledge, but nothing on animagus transformation. Why? If students are trusted to study advanced transfiguration, why not offer controlled guidance in this unique branch of it? Why is the subject omitted entirely from the official curriculum? The answer may lie in power and fear. An animagus holds a distinct advantage in espionage, concealment, and escape. Sirius Black, in his animagus form as a large black dog, eluded the Ministry for months. Peter Pettigrew, as a rat, lived for years undetected, right under the noses of the Weasley family. If animagus training became common, the Ministry might lose control over one of the few remaining layers of magical surveillance. It is easier to suppress than to regulate. Even Rita Skeeter, the notorious journalist, exploited her unregistered animagus status to publish damaging secrets. As a beetle, she eavesdropped on private conversations, hiding in hair, perching on windowsills. Hermione Granger eventually discovered her secret, capturing her in a jar and threatening to expose her. This incident alone reveals how dangerous and useful the ability can be. Yet once again, the message was clear. If you want to become an animagus, do it in secret, like a criminal. There is no official path. The Hogwarts curriculum is vast. Students are taught to brew Polyjuice Potion, a highly advanced transformation potion that allows one to assume the appearance of another person. albeit temporarily and with considerable effort. They are taught the Imperious Curse, one of the 3 unforgivable curses under controlled conditions. They practice dueling, apparition, and even study dangerous creatures in care of magical creatures. And yet, Animagus transformation, arguably one of the most artistically and ethically fascinating magical arts, is absent, not even mentioned. This omission becomes even more curious when one considers the symbolic weight of the Animagus. It is not merely a spell, it is a merging of identity and instinct. Each wizard's Animagus form is unique, tied intimately to their character. James Potter's stag, noble and bold; Sirius Black's dog, loyal and fierce; Peter Pettigrew's rat, cowardly and cunning. The transformation reveals as much as it empowers. It is a magical reflection of the soul. That such a discipline is hidden rather than celebrated is telling. The fear of misuse cannot fully explain the absence of instruction. The same could be said of any number of magical disciplines. Potions can kill, charms can maim, transfiguration gone wrong can result in disaster. And yet all of these are taught. Even Horcruxes, the darkest of magical acts, are at least acknowledged in academic circles, albeit with great caution. Why then is the Animagus treated differently? What is it about this art that so unnerves the magical establishment? One theory is that the ability challenges the very definition of magical identity. Most magic in the wizarding world is external. Spells cast, potions brewed, wands waved. The Animagus, however, becomes the magic. There is no wand, no incantation repeated. The transformation is internal, intrinsic. It blurs the boundary between human and beast, between conscious choice and instinctual behavior. In a world obsessed with classification, muggle versus wizard, squib versus magical, the Animagus represents a dangerous ambiguity. Hermione Granger, with all her brilliance and academic obsession, never attempted to become an Animagus, not because she lacked the skill, but because the system never offered her the opportunity. If anyone could have mastered the technique legally, it was Hermione. Her lack of interest reveals not disinterest, but inaccessibility. The magical establishment made the process so secretive, so arcane, so riddled with obstacles that even the brightest minds were dissuaded. Even the very documentation of Animagus transformation is scarce. The only known detailed account of the process appears in obscure alchemical texts buried in private libraries, often requiring permission to access. These books are not part of standard magical education. They are relics, whispers from the past, available only to those with connections or reckless ambition. This further reinforces the notion that the subject is deliberately hidden, not merely forgotten. When Dolores Umbridge took over Hogwarts and introduced her draconian measures, she was obsessed with control. Yet even she never addressed the topic of Animagi. Not to ban it, not to regulate it, nothing. The topic remained in the shadows, untouched, unspoken, perhaps because the power it offered was one the Ministry feared more than it understood. Even a woman as tyrannical as Umbridge knew where not to tread. The unspoken rule seems to be, if you want to become an Animagus, you must break the rules. There is no license to learn, no teacher to guide, no classroom to practice. The magical world, so proud of its traditions and knowledge, quietly locks this particular door. And like all locked doors, it only invites those curious or desperate enough to break through. In many ways, the secrecy surrounding the Animagus mirrors the broader contradictions of the wizarding world. It is a society that prizes bloodlines over talent, tradition over progress, secrecy over transparency. The Animagus transformation, with all its beauty, danger, and mystery, is a victim of this cultural paradox. It is revered in theory, feared in practice, and ignored in education. The Marauder's legacy is proof that passion, friendship, and necessity can overcome even the most guarded secrets. But their story is also a warning. Peter Pettigrew, the weakest of the three, used his Animagus form to betray, to murder, to hide. Not because he was evil from the start, but because he was taught nothing else. No guidance, no ethics, no supervision, just instinct and fear. Animagus training deserves more than whispers and secrets. It deserves light, structure, discussion, education, because as long as the magical world refuses to teach it, the only ones who will learn it are those with something to hide, and that may be the most dangerous transformation of all. Number 24. What if a wizard loses control and gets stuck in animal form? In the darkest corners of magical knowledge, there are spells so powerful and so unpredictable that even the most gifted wizards fear to tread. Among them lies the Animagi transformation, the art of turning into an animal at will. It is a wonder of magical control, demanding flawless mastery, deep self-awareness, and unwavering discipline. But what happens when that discipline falters? What becomes of the wizard who steps too far, too fast, and fails? Not many speak of the failures, yet they exist, hidden beneath layers of cautionary tales and dusty ministry records. The official line, of course, is strict. Becoming an animagus requires years of study, registration with the Ministry of Magic, and supervision by an appointed magical mentor. But as every Hogwarts student knows, rules are made to be broken, and those who break them sometimes pay a price so steep it silences even the most rebellious. In the Scottish Highlands, long before Remus Lupin ever howled under a full moon, or Sirius Black stalked the night in canine form, there was a boy named Elric Thorne. He was a Ravenclaw, brilliant, solitary, and obsessed. Obsessed not with grades or glory, but with the raw mystery of magic. His passion, the animagus transformation, Elric believed that true understanding of the self required one to walk in the skin of another creature. He didn't wait for NEWT-level transfiguration. He studied in secret, practiced in abandoned corridors, and sought magic older than even Professor McGonagall's stern gaze could reach. He succeeded. At least he thought he had. In the winter of 1947, at 17, he managed the partial transformation, paws, snout, fur. But the process was excruciating. Bones cracked, skin stretched, vision split between man and beast. And then one night, deep in the Forbidden Forest, Elric disappeared. He was never seen again, not as a boy, not as a wizard. But rumours lingered. There are tales told in hushed voices among centaurs and forbidden scrolls in the Department of Mysteries that speak of the silver-eyed fox. A creature too intelligent to be wild, yet too animal to be tame. It watches humans from the shadows, never attacking, never retreating. Its eyes, those unmistakable storm-grey eyes, are hauntingly human. It is said the creature follows Hogwarts students back to the edge of the forest and vanishes before teachers can spot it. Hagrid once muttered, half drunk near the fire, that it knew its way round like it built the place. Could Elric be alive still? Not as a boy, not as a man, but as something between. A creature trapped forever in fur, his mind half submerged in instincts, his humanity flickering like a candle in the wind? If so, he would not be the only one. For every documented animagus in the Ministry's registry, there are 2 more who tried and failed. And some of those failures weren't harmless. Professor McGonagall once warned her class, the animagus transformation is not merely a trick of shape, it is a surrender of self. You risk more than your body, you risk your soul. She spoke those words after catching a 5th-year student attempting unsupervised transformation magic. The student, Marianne Ketteridge, was lucky. She only ended up with fur on her hands for a week, but others have not been so fortunate. There's the story of Niels Warwick, an eccentric scholar at Durmstrang who believed the path to immortality lay in mastering beast form without returning. He claimed that human life was fleeting, but the body of a wolf, free, primal, ageless in spirit, was the key to transcendence. His journals were filled with disturbing accounts of dreamlike states where he began to forget language and time. One day, he too vanished. Years later, a massive grey wolf with a scar over one eye was spotted wandering the steppes, always alone, always watching. It never howled, never hunted in packs, and it always fled from wizards. A pattern emerges, chilling in its clarity. Those who attempt the transformation before they are ready, who rush the ritual, who defy the ancient warnings, often become something else entirely. Not human, Not animal, it's something in between. They retain slivers of memory, flashes of recognition, but no voice, no wand, no way back. The worst cases are the silent ones, those whose bodies remain stuck mid-transformation. The so-called wretched ones, whose very existence is erased by magical law. Deep in the bowels of the Department of Mysteries lies a hidden vault, sealed by 7 enchantments, containing case files deemed too dangerous for public record. In one file, dated 1902, there is a photograph of a creature, half badger, half boy, curled up in a cage, its eyes glassy with confusion, mouth open as if trying to form words it no longer remembered. The caption reads, "Subject 4A failed return, do not engage, non-verbal memory intact, dangerous if provoked." Even Albus Dumbledore, known for his tolerance and kindness, once spoke grimly of such transformations. In a private letter to Bathilda Bagshot, uncovered after her death, he wrote, "There are fates worse than death, and one of them is forgetting who you are. Magic, when wielded without patience, becomes a mirror that swallows the self. I fear we are raising a generation too eager to gaze into that abyss." The real danger lies not in the magic itself, but in the arrogance of the wizard. Becoming an animagus requires deep meditation, ritual components that are rare and dangerous, mandrake leaves kept under the tongue for a full month, the alignment of the moon, the essence of the self written in runes and sealed in potion. One mistake, one misstep, and the magic turns on its master. The marauders, James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew, were among the few who managed the transformation in secret and survived, but their success has created a dangerous mythos. Students see the act as rebellious, thrilling. They forget that even these talented wizards spent years perfecting their craft, and even they were not untouched by darkness. Peter, the weakest among them, transformed not into a noble beast, but into a rat, a scavenger, a traitor in animal skin. The choice of form reveals the soul. There's an ancient saying among magical historians, "The beast you become is the beast you are." If true, then what of those who lose control? Do they become beasts because their hearts were wild, or does the transformation unleash the wildness within them? In Albania's Blackwoods, there are reports of a stag larger than any known breed. Its antlers glow faintly in moonlight. Local wizards believe it was once a man, a hermit, long ago, who used animagus magic to escape persecution. But the longer he remained in stag form, the less he remembered of his past. Now he runs from firelight and fears the scent of potions. Yet some claim, when the wind is right, you can hear a faint, broken melody in his breath, a tune hummed by someone who once loved music. The enchantment of animagus magic is binding. Once complete, it becomes a part of you. But if interrupted, if fractured, it can become a prison. Magic that should flow with purpose instead becomes tangled. The wizard may find himself unable to speak, unable to hold a wand. The form resists return, like a dream that will not release the sleeper. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement keeps such incidents classified. It is easier to deny the existence of half-formed beings than to explain them. But eyewitness accounts persist. A dragon keeper in Romania described a lion with eyes like a man's, hiding near the caves. A traveller in the Andes spoke of a serpent that moved like it was thinking. A magizoologist in Africa swore she saw a jackal observing her camp each night with eerie, human sorrow. None of these creatures attacked, all fled when approached. Yet their presence lingers as if waiting to be remembered. These beings are not dark creatures. They are not inferi or werewolves. They are remnants, souls who overreached, whose bodies betrayed them, whose magic went unanswered. The world calls them legends, but what if they are not legends? What if they are victims? One of the most harrowing accounts comes from an old Auror, retired now, who once patrolled the northern woods of Scotland. He claimed to have seen a bear, hunched and trembling, with patchy fur and an unnatural limp. When he drew near, he heard it whisper, not a growl, not a sound, but an actual whisper, "Home." He reported the sighting. The ministry wiped the records. Too dangerous for public interpretation, they said. And so these stories remain, passed through whispers and firelight, hidden in footnotes and forbidden books. But they raise a terrifying possibility. What if some of the beasts in our world are not beasts at all? What if they are trapped wizards, forgotten students, lost dreamers? What if the forest holds not just danger, but memory? It is no wonder the transformation is so regulated. It is no wonder that even McGonagall, a master of the art, speaks of it with reverence. She once said, to become an animal is to let go of your voice. To return is to remember who you are. Those who fail that return are not evil. They are echoes, and they haunt not to harm but to be seen. Elric Thorn, if he is the silver-eyed fox, still roams. And if you ever walk near the edge of the forbidden forest and feel watched, not with hunger but with recognition, you might consider whispering his name. He may not answer, but he might remember, for magic does not forget. It merely waits. Number 25. How much does the animal form influence a wizard's destiny? It begins, always, with a reflection, an animal reflection. Not in the mirror, but in the magic, a transformation that's meant to serve, to protect, to mask, or to explore. But what if it's more than a tool? What if the animal shape a witch or wizard assumes is a keyhole into the soul, exposing something deeper, something unspoken? Could it be that a person's animagus form is not merely chosen by magical logic, but predestined, etched into the spirit long before the transformation ever takes place? Peter Pettigrew, known to most as Wormtail, never intended to become a rat in the moral sense of the word, but magic has no regard for intent, it reveals. His animagus form, a small, shivering rodent scuttling through cracks and shadows, was not a curse cast upon him, but a mirror held up to his nature. Cowardly, secretive, ever watching for bigger predators to cling to, Peter's rat form was a physical manifestation of his truest instincts. He betrayed James and Lily not because he was evil in the conventional sense, but because he was weak. He scurried toward the scent of safety. The rat, it seems, had been gnawing at him all along. Contrast this with Sirius Black, the infamous escaped prisoner, and yet the most loyal of friends. His animagus form, a great shaggy black dog, was neither subtle nor symbolic, in a way that needed interpretation. Dogs are loyal, dogs are protective, dogs will break through any door, cross any distance, suffer any hardship to stand at the side of those they love, and Sirius did just that. He risked his soul in Azkaban, his life in the Shrieking Shack, and his safety in number 12, Grimmauld Place. Every choice he made, even those born of recklessness, aligned with the pure-hearted courage of his canine self. "Then you should have died," Harry once shouted at Peter, referring to James and Lily's betrayal. "Died rather than betray your friends as we would have done for you." Book 3, Prisoner of Azkaban. Sirius would have done just that. Because that is what a dog does. It stays, it protects, it fights for the pack. But this phenomenon isn't restricted to the marauders. Rita Skeeter, the venomous journalist, took the form of a beetle, unregistered, of course, for legality would have ruined the thrill. She scurried into private spaces, latched herself onto other people's secrets, and lived off the flesh of others' pain. Like an insect, she was resilient, invasive, difficult to squash. Her articles left trails of chaos wherever they went. Was it coincidence that she turned into something with antennae for gossip and a carapace for immunity? Or was it inevitability? Animagi, unlike Patronuses, do not change with emotion. They are fixed, rigid like the bones they morph into, immovable like destiny. The animal chosen by one's core remains the same for life. There is no revision, no redemption through the shape. You are what the magic says you are. You are what your soul shows. This leads us to a harrowing question. If Peter had turned into a falcon, could he have risen above betrayal? If Rita's form had been a songbird, would her words have been kinder, or were they always going to be what they became, regardless of form? Because maybe the form doesn't shape the fate, maybe it confirms it. James Potter turned into a stag, a noble, towering creature of the forest. Not just graceful, but proud. It wasn't just any animal, it was a leader's animal, one that stands visible, protective of its herd. James, in his short life, carried that burden. He defied Voldemort 3 times. He became a father, a husband, a symbol of resistance. He died with a wand in hand, trying to hold off the darkness. Like the stag in the woods, he stood tall, even as the hunter approached. When Harry conjured his Patronus, also a stag, it wasn't just blood that bound them. It was that same inner strength, the same readiness to face fear, to stand in front of others and say, "Not today." A child mirrors the father not just in flesh, but in form. Harry did not become an animagus, but if he had, is there any doubt he would have taken the same shape? Minerva McGonagall, sharp as iron and wise as stone, takes the form of a tabby cat. Not a lion, not a lynx, a tabby. Yet there is something deeply poetic about her form. It is quiet, observant, shrewd. A cat that watches everything and misses nothing. She navigates Hogwarts with silent authority, not because she demands respect, but because she moves in ways that command it. Her transformation is graceful and subtle, just like her leadership. If you don't believe in signs, just look at the glasses around the eyes of her feline form. Even magic draws parallels. The question then grows darker. Is this magic impartial or judgmental? Does it choose or does it reveal? Is it a sentence passed by one's soul? And if it is, can it be overturned? Remus Lupin never chose his curse. The werewolf is not an animagus form, but a tragedy. Yet even this forced transformation reflected something within him. Lupin was soft-spoken, thoughtful, and burdened by guilt. The wolf inside didn't make him a monster, it made him aware of his capacity for danger, and he spent his life making sure he never hurt anyone. The beast inside did not win, but it howled always. Was it a warning or a wound? There's a theory in magical circles that the animagus form is the shape your soul takes when stripped of pretense. That it is a kind of magical Rorschach test, an unfiltered confession of character. Not what you wish to be, but what you are in your bones and blood. If that is true, then how terrifying to know that magic can name you before you name yourself. And what happens to a person who denies their form? What if Sirius had refused the dog? What if Peter had fought the rat? Would the magic have yielded to their will, or would it have punished them? We'll never know, because they accepted their fate. Or perhaps they were already living it long before the transformation occurred. There's something almost mythic about this concept. The Greeks believed that souls were bound to animal spirits, totems of virtue or vice. In the wizarding world, perhaps this belief was never myth but reality. A lion's heart in Gryffindor, a serpent's cunning in Slytherin. But when you become that animal, when you feel the paws, the fur, the fangs, something changes, or maybe something awakens. Animagi do not choose their form. They only choose whether to learn it. And therein lies the great risk. What if you do not like what you become? What if you recoil from the fur, from the feathers, from the echo of your own soul? In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry looks into Snape's memories and sees a young Sirius bullying Snape, there's a chilling realization. Even dogs can snarl. Even the noble form hides darker instincts, because form doesn't make you good, it just shows you who you are. Whether you rise above it or collapse beneath it, that's the story. There is no registry for the soul, no parchment that records the curve of your morality. But the animagus transformation comes close. It writes your essence into physicality. You become your nature, and then the world sees you for what you are.